and I'd like to welcome you to the Oracle Outlook for the week starting September the 26th, 2016. In this video, I'll be doing a Lenormand card reading, and the deck that's going to be assisting me is different from my usual go-to. If you're no stranger to these videos, you know that I typically use the Mystical Lenormand, but at the very last minute, I mean literally the very last minute, I was prompted to use the Mystical Lenormand, so I'm going to go with that. So the Mystical Lenormand is by Regula Fiechter. The artwork in the deck is by Trösch, and it is published by AGM. And so now we're going to get right to the table and take a closer look at the cards that are going to be making up this week's reading. And here we are with the deck on the table. So I'm going to take the deck in hand. I'm going to shuffle the cards. And as I do for these weekly general readings, I'm asking the question, what do we need to know about the week ahead? What do we need to know in terms of information, insight, and guidance that's going to be helpful to us moving through the week ahead? And as I'm shuffling the cards, I'm going to invite that if you work with the Lenormand, I'm going to invite you to think about what the cards mean for you. Any thoughts, feelings, impressions you get about the cards as I talk about them. And let that be the way you personalize the reading for yourself. I'm going to shuffle one more time. And then I'm going to cut the deck. And if you've been following my videos for some time now, you know that when I work with the Lenormand, I do a line of 5 for these videos. So I'm taking the top 5 cards from the deck and laying them out in a line. I do a line of 5. Okay, just slide them over just a little bit more. Okay. So when I work with the line of 5, I always start with the middle card, because the middle card for me always can represent like what the central issue of the week might be, or what we're being asked to focus on for the week ahead. So the card is the Fox. Okay, so the Fox is a card for me that can represent job and employment. So there may be a focus on job and employment, and with that, one's skill. With that, what are your skills in terms of work? It could also be that somebody is seeking a job or having some kind of search with employment. For some people, I tend to look at this as self-employment. So if you're self-employed, this card could be asking you to focus on your self-employment venture, whatever that is for you. But again, going with that, the idea here of what's your skill, what's your craft, what's your trade, and working with that. The other thing about the Fox is that the Fox can represent having a strategy in mind with that. So whether you are a job seeker and you're seeking employment, or you are actually on a job, or that you are self-employed, no matter what the scenario is for you, this card could represent having a strategy with that. So again, so this might be the week where if you're self-employed, I'm just going with that as the first thing that popped into my head. If you're self-employed, then it's about what would you need to know or do, and coming up with a strategy around that in order to, and this is the other part of the Fox, in order to survive, because the Fox is an animal that just does what it does out of a need to survive. So what is it that you would need to know or do or have in place so you can take the energy off of maybe doing it just to survive? So let's say you have a job, and you may be looking at your job as, I'm doing it just because I need to survive, which can translate to I needed to pay the bills, or I needed to do this or that kind of energy. And so we're being asked to take a look at that this week. Now, the Fox can also represent needing to be kind of on guard against other people, because the Fox can be a card about like somebody who may come across as a friend, and I'm seeing the word in my head, frenemy. So it could be like a person who comes across as a friend, but may have an ulterior motive, because the fox is a card that can represent manipulation or being conned or being scammed, things of that nature. So it could just be we're being put on notice about like who's coming to us, who's asking us to get involved with whatever there is that they're doing, because it could be on the surface, it could be something that seems good and seems right, but underneath it, it could be a con or a scam. So we're being asked to pay attention to that this week. The other thing here I'm seeing with the fox is sometimes the fox can be a card that can represent something being wrong or something being a mistake. So this week we might be, depending on what the other cards are around it, we're being encouraged to maybe be mindful of the mistakes that we make, or be mindful of the mistakes that other people make, and maybe not being so quick to label them as bad because of the mistake, whatever it is. Now, of course, there are different degrees of severity of mistake. So depending on the severity of the mistake, it may be like the person just didn't know any better, that kind of thing. And on the other side of that, it could be something that is really monumental. So it's about like taking a look at any kind of errors or mistakes this week that either we're going to make or that other people might make that have an impact on us. So I'm seeing that with the fox. So now moving to the cards that immediately flank the fox, we have on the left, we have the sun, and on the right, we have the whip. Now this is very interesting because I was led to choose this card today, this deck rather, today, and I saw the whip as a card that prompted me to use it. I had in mind to use a different deck. I had in mind to use my go-to, my Piotnik, and then at the very last minute, just this morning, I was prompted to switch the decks, and this was the card that I saw in my mind that got me to do that. So I already know what the whip means, so I'll start with that since that's jumping out at me in the moment. So just what I said about the mistakes and doing something wrong, it could be like if we make a mistake this week or somebody else makes a mistake, I'm going to go with more so us as individuals rather than putting the energy towards other people. But if we make a mistake or we do something that we consider to be bad this week, then the whip following it is a card that says we have to be careful about beating ourselves up about this. And if you notice, the image on the card has a man who's whipping himself. So it could be, the idea here, like, we all are human and we're all going to make mistakes. And so knowing that in mind, if you make a mistake, don't beat yourself up for it after the fact. And I'm saying after the fact because the whip comes after the fox in that regard. Now, if you are either employed, now if you have a job, then for me, this card, the whip, can represent training and discipline. So it could be like this could be a week where you're focusing on becoming more disciplined about what it is that you do, or maybe feeling like there's more training that you need to seek out in terms of making you a better employee on the job. If you are self-employed, and going back to the idea here about your craft, your trade, your skill, then this card, again, going with the idea here, is there more training you might need to pursue regarding your craft or your skill? Is there more, do you need to be more disciplined about your self-employment venture? Things of that nature. So those are things that come up with the whip, but I like the fact that the whip came up and I had seen that prior to. Okay, now on the other side, we have the sun. The sun is one of the most positive cards in the deck, in my opinion. The sun can represent things like success, it can represent confidence, it can represent positive energy, it can represent something being illuminated, going with the idea that the sun brings everything to light or shines a light on situations and circumstances. So again here, if we go with the idea here with the job, employment, self-employment scenario with the fox, then it could just be, training or discipline that's going to either create a sense of being more confident or more successful with that. Could be the reason why we're focusing on our job or employment venture is because we want to be more successful with it, or that we want to be more confident in that. So I'm seeing that with the sun on this side. So that would be the cards that would offer more in-depth information about the focus. And so now we'll take a look at the outer card to see how this might wind up. Okay, the anchor is on the left and we have the crossroads on the right. Okay, so the anchor is another work card. For me, it represents doing something that's either like long-term work. We've done it for a long time because the anchor is something that's pretty stationary, or it keeps things in place. So it could be, the idea here is about wanting to create a sense of stability and security around what it is that you're doing, or that you are in it for the long term. So I'm seeing that, but this is a classic work card for me. It could also be to having a sense of perseverance or persistence with what it is that we're doing in terms of the work or the employment. So it could be, like I said, persistence and perseverance, and needing to have hope. So I'm seeing that with the anchor card. And then on the other side, we have the crossroads. And so the crossroads can come up when, if we're working towards the end of the line here, it's like we may be faced with choices, options, alternatives. I always see that with the crossroads. It could be at the end of the week where we're doing all this work with the training and the discipline, let's say with the whip, so that we can move in a new direction. You know, and if we go with the idea here, back to the whip with the first thought I had about beating ourselves up because of a mistake we've made, you know, then here the crossroads could be like, if you're going to beat yourself up, if you're going to torment yourself, if you're going to punish yourself, that's a choice you're making. And how can you make a better choice? The idea here is like, how can you learn from that mistake? Rather than maybe conditioned behavior is about beating yourself up about it. Maybe you're prone to do that. How can you make a different choice, a better choice? So that, you know, sets you on the path of learning from that mistake. You know, I'm a big believer in nothing happens by accident, nothing happens by chance, you know. And our mistakes, instead of looking at them as, you know, something bad, they are actually opportunities for growth. We learn more from the mistakes that we make rather than if everything just went along perfectly. So I'm seeing that as a possibility here with the experience that we have at the week, during the week, excuse me. But by the end of the week, we may be facing a choice, or we may be seeing options or alternatives, or we may be considering a new path or a new direction. So that, again, that could be with the job. Sometimes I see this at the end. It could represent like a departure. So somebody may be planning on leaving a particular job situation, and with that, then it could be exploring the options that are ahead of you. It could also be like, if we go with the idea here, like somebody's working just to survive, then it could be, you know, facing a number of options. So it could be like, sometimes I see the fox as part-time work, and then this card here, the crossroads at the end, could be the idea here of multiple things, because sometimes the crossroads splits in multiple directions or goes into multiple directions. So it could be like the idea of here, like multiple jobs, you know, multiple sources of employment in the future. So I'm seeing that. It could be like the person's done work for a long time, or a particular kind of work for a long time, and that now's the time where they are moving in a new direction. Sometimes the whip card can come up when maybe long-term work that they were successful at, that they've done for a long period of time, and then now they may be facing a layoff. Sometimes I see the whip as layoffs. Could be like something that happens repeatedly. So they find themselves repeatedly being laid off within this long-term work, maybe, and so it's just gotten to the point now where they may be looking at moving in a new direction to kind of just stop this cycle, this thing from happening again and again. It could also be too here, the whip can be about abuse. So it could be, again, going with the idea here about maybe potentially being taken advantage of, being conned or being scammed, being manipulated, and beating yourself up for that. It could be like maybe you just kind of, instead of having this repeated energy happening, you decide like it's time to make a different choice, it's time to move in a new direction, it's time to either depart from this person, the con person, the scammer, the manipulator. It's time to move away from that, because all you're really doing is the person's abusing you, and then the longer you stay in that situation, then you are abusing yourself as well. So I'm seeing those as possibilities for the week ahead. So now, since I'm using this deck, I've also was prompted to look at the cards differently. So if you notice, I normally read the playing cards, but this particular deck doesn't have playing cards. So what I'm going to do instead, and keeping with the things that I do with the other readings with the tarot cards and the angel cards, I'm going to be looking at things that we might need to know for the beginning of the week, maybe the middle of the week, and then the end of the week. Now, approaching the cards as information for the beginning, middle, and end of the week, possibly, the way I've been led to do this would be to take the first 3 cards for the beginning of the week. So if we do that, we have Anchor, Sun, and Fox for the beginning of the week. So going with the idea here, the way that I would read the line, I would start with looking at the first 2 cards as a pair. So we have Anchor and Sun. So for me, that would be read as work that leads to a success, going with the Sun being success, or successful work as a possibility. Then the Sun and the Fox could be happiness that's wrong, or wrong happiness, or the illumination of a mistake. I would see that. And then Anchor and Fox could be security that's being investigated due to a con or a scam. And it brings to mind, for me, the issue with Yahoo. Yahoo's in the news now because of their data being hacked or breach in their security. And as a result, a lot of people, I think it was 500 million people, I may be wrong about the number, but there's a huge number of people who possibly have had their email accounts hacked. And then as a result of that, scammers are sending phishing emails out to people in terms of getting more access to secure information and data. So I'm seeing that. So we may be hearing at the beginning of the week more information about the Yahoo situation. So I'm seeing that. And now that brings me to the cards for the middle of the week, which would be Sun, Fox, and the Whip. So now the first thing that comes to my mind would be I'm looking at the Whip card in the line, and we all know that this coming Monday, at the beginning of the week, there's going to be the first debate between Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump. And so I'm seeing that. So there may be something having to do with debate, because if you go with the idea like the beginning of the week is Monday and Tuesday, the debate airs on Monday, there may be a lot of conversation, a lot of heated conversation about those debates, because the Whip is a card that can represent debates, heated arguments, and fights. And there could be more, maybe more news possibly about the unrest that's going on due to a lot of the shootings that are taking place. So there may be some more unrest, or we may be experiencing more of that. That may be one of the prime topics being debated. Of course, that's going to be on everybody's mind. So will the moderators bring that up during the debates? All the unrest that we're experiencing. And I'm saying that, and I'm talking specifically about here in the United States. I know there's lots of places where there is unrest, but the debates are taking place here in the United States around the presidential nominees, the candidates for the next president of the United States. So there may be more conversation around that this week. So I'm looking at that. So with that in mind, again, we have the repetition of Sun and Fox. So that could be confidence with the strategy, because both candidates are working on strategies for how they are going to handle themselves during the debate. So I'm seeing that. It could also be the illumination of a mistake, going with the idea here that Fox can be like, something wrong or something of a mistake. So I'm seeing that. The other thing that's coming to my mind here is, if we go with the idea here that the sun is illumination, there could be illumination of repeated cheating, because the fox can be a card that can represent cheating, and then the whip is a card that can represent something repetitive, and this is a card that can represent casual sex as that part of that, because the whip can be physical activity. So I'm seeing this as a possibility that there's going to be illumination of repeated cheating, and with that it brings to mind the situation with Brad Pitt and Angelina Jolie. They are going through divorce proceedings, and right now Brad Pitt is under investigation. That's one of my other meanings for the fox, for allegations of abusing one of his 6 children. So there may be some information in the middle of the week that brings that to light, because like I said, as I know now, or as I've heard, the last I've heard about it, the charges had been filed, and that Brad Pitt was cooperating with investigators into those allegations. So I'm seeing that. So we may be hearing more about that in the coming week. So I'm seeing that. We also may be hearing that more as the divorce proceedings between Brad Pitt and Angelina Jolie go on. We may be hearing more allegations of numerous affairs, because I had heard that he had already been accused of cheating with one particular co-star, and another actress. And so there may be, as time goes on, there may be more of that coming to light. So I'm seeing that as possibilities for the middle of the week. And then the end of the week, we'd have the final 3 cards, which would be Fox, the Whip, and Crossroads. So going with the Fox and the Whip again, it could be a strategy regarding a debate. Again, investigation of abuse, so I'm seeing that. And I already talked about the repetitive cheating. So there's that. Could also be somebody is actually taking the lens off of the more national news. Could be somebody is being tormented on the job, or being punished on the job, or maybe facing some kind of abuse on the job. It's making me feel in this regard, it could be, if we go with the idea here that the whip is casual sex, then it could be somebody may be facing harassment on the job. And it could be like sexual overtones, or having a sexual nature. And, you know, it could also be, this just popped into my mind, which is unusual, but it could also be somebody who has a job, you know, maybe as an escort, trying to use the polite language for around that, an escort, or somebody who works in that kind of industry, that kind of thing. So, again, also too, with that, going with the escort thing, it could be actually somebody who works with oh, I can't even think of the term, but it's like the issues around control and domination, something like that. Somebody who works as like a dominatrix or something of that nature could be. But the term for it is kind of escaping my mind. It might come back, but I'm seeing that, which is very unusual. It's making me think of like 50 Shades of Grey. So that kind of thing, like bondage and things of that nature. And so, okay, I'm going to get off that. But that's what I'm seeing. I'm seeing like 50 Shades of Grey. So there's that possibility there with that. And then Crossroads and the whip, or the whip and the crossroads, could just again be, you know, this idea here about something being repetitive, the sexual activity, like again multiple times, something numerous, you know, things of that nature. Or that if we looked at the middle of the week about the investigation maybe into Brad Pitt, let's go back to that. It could be like the investigation of abuse, you know, leads to or comes to a decision, because crossroads can be about a choice or a decision. So there may be a choice coming to that, or, you know, a decision being made in regards to that. So that could happen more towards the end of the week. if we go with the idea here that Fox and Crossroads can represent multiple jobs. So I talked earlier in the first segment about like the idea here, maybe somebody seeking work or having a job or employment issue. It may either lead to a departure, like I said before, or that a direction, moving in a new direction, or that could be that options or alternatives or multiple jobs come up in whatever the person is trying to work on. It could even be like a person has a job and they're also working on self-employment, and so they're working on both of those and moving maybe the self-employment venture along, which is going to take training and discipline, being the middle card. So I'm seeing that as a possibility here. So that's how I would read possibilities for the end of the week. And so now, wrapping up this week's reading, I felt led to take the numbers on all the cards and add them up for what I call the essence card. So we'll see, we'll drill this down to one card and see what the message of that card is for this week. So the anchor is 35. So 35 plus 31 for the sun, plus 14 for the fox, plus 11 for the whip, plus 22 for the crossroads. We have 113. There are 36 cards in the deck, so I'm going to take the number, which is 113, since it's over 36, I'm going to add the digits together. So 1 plus 1 is 2, plus 3 is 5. So the fifth card in the deck is the tree. And here we are. So here's the tree. So at the essence, or the essence for this week, the tree can be a card that can represent growth and development. So that could be personal growth and development. It can be spiritual growth and development. So the whole thing here could be about things growing and developing. Now the tree can also be about roots. So it could be something that we're taking a look at the roots or the foundation of something. It could be like if we're working on something growing and developing. So let's say, going back with the first possibility here with somebody's self-employment venture. First thing with the tree could be about they're wanting to grow their business. This card would suggest that it would take time, because the tree is a card that represents time and having patience, because trees take quite a long time actually to grow. So it could be like whatever it is that this person is developing could be just a matter of time and needing to be patient in the process. Could also be, with tree being a card of health and healing, it could be the idea here is about healing. So it could be the person is actually a healer. And then with that, then the whip card could be about like gaining training or becoming more disciplined in that healing modality or that healing skill. And then with that could also be too, with the crossroads and tree, could be the person is an alternative healer. So it could be like an energy healer, somebody who might be into Reiki or healing touch or quantum touch, you know, something that may fall out of the conventional healing modalities or healing skills or healing trades. So I'm seeing that as a possibility here. The other thing here with a lot of the other things that I had talked about could be like if there is an investigation, like I said with the Yahoo situation, it could be like there may be some patience in getting that issue resolved. Or it could be like there's going to be something more having to do with maybe there's going to be like a growing number of people who have had their data breached, because that's a security issue going back to that. And so it could also be too people wanting to become more secure, going with the anchor being security. Then this card would be like growing stability or growing security, things of that nature. So it's like, how can people heal and recover from maybe this data breach, especially if they're one of the people who had their accounts compromised. So it could be like, how do you heal and recover from that? The other thing here with the whip card, you know, a lot of the things with the debates going on that are going to be taking place, and all the things having to do with the unrest that we're experiencing here in the United States, where I am at. It could be, you know, now's the time for how can we help, how can we heal, how can we recover from this? Are the politicians going to be talking about how we can start the healing process, because that's what has to happen here. There has to be someone has to get the conversation going where we can start the healing process. So is that going to take place this week? Could also be too, going with the idea here that the tree can also represent extended family. If you go here with the idea that the tree can represent a family tree and genealogy and, you know, family roots, things of that nature. So it could also be too, I'm seeing the idea here, if we go with the Brad Pitt and Angelina Jolie, I have trouble saying her name, Angelina Jolie situation, it could be before they make that situation become really, really ugly in the public, you know, is there a way that they could do so if they're going to split, if they can do that split in a way that still provides healing for the family rather than making it an ugly fight in public. You know, so I'm seeing that as possibilities for the week. But the energy of the tree is all about health, healing. So again, it could be an issue of like, if you've been wronged, if you've been taken advantage of, if you've been manipulated, if you've been conned to, if you've been lied to, if you've been cheated on, how can you begin the healing process? And so we're looking at that. So maybe the idea here is we're looking at the situation with Brad Pitt and Angelina Jolie. We're looking at our politicians. You know, we tend to look at politicians as, you know, being less than honest. So how are they being a reflection for ourselves in terms of what we need to do, both for ourselves to heal and then as a collective to heal? But I'm seeing that as the overarching or the overarching energy for the week having to do with healing. So that will be how I wrap up this week's Oracle Outlook. I'm James Himm Mitchell, and I'm signing off. And as I sign off, I want to thank you for sharing this space here with me this week. And I look forward to sharing the same space with you in our next video together. So until then, I'm hoping that you have a wonderful day. I'm hoping you have a wonderful week. And until we get together in the future, take care.